Yeah, well, I suppose the biggest thing, and just to give you a bit of background, growing up, like a lot of kids, I wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed in regards to learning, and I just really enjoyed, my life. And one of the things that really grabbed me early on was my love of sport. And as you said, my background is with rugby and with the Manu Samoa. And when I started playing as a young kid, that was one of the few things that really sort of made me feel special. It made me feel good about myself outside of the chores and doing, things for the family and going to school. Rugby was the one thing that really just made me feel special. My parents used to always say, don't play that game. It's a waste of time. You should be doing your school. But there was something in it that actually made me feel special. So, to me, it was through that love of sport that I actually realised that, that there's more to life than just that. But the reality is as I grew and as I started to become better at rugby, I started to get opportunities, and then eventually I started making rep teams, and then sooner or later people started, noticing not this little chubby Samoan boy, but they started, sort of noticing that this guy's actually an athlete. And so you actually start getting attention. And the thing is that in our home, it was about being humble. It was about not being bigger than yourself. And so therefore, any sort of emotions of, feeling good about yourself and feeling a little bit proud, I suppose I tried to suppress it because, it wasn't about being that. It was just about being humble, and I understand that. But there's something in us that just wants to be praised and wants to be loved and wants to be better than and special. And I think that's what I craved. And so by getting that attention, that's where my desire to get better at rugby and to crave sort of praise and people thinking that I'm better than what I am and not focusing on my schoolwork, that really came to the fore. So, when we talk about our faith, I suppose my faith started to, dwindle or started to wane when I started making these top rep teams. And I've been blessed to be playing for, the Auckland team. I'm blessed to play for Counties, blessed to play for North Harbour, and eventually really blessed to play for Manu Samoa, the home and the nation of my parents. So as you know, through that whole journey, I really started to become quite, I suppose in some respects, conceited, or even just, quietly, proud of myself because I was doing it. But what I was really doing was I was seeking the approval and seeking the attention of people through my actions playing rugby. And you know what? When you start doing that, that's when you really start to struggle with life because you're no longer playing for the love of the game. You're actually playing for the love of the people and for the attention of the people. And anyone that knows that, they call it, people pleasing. And I think a lot of us as specific parents, as kids, we do want to please our parents. We do want to please people. The problem for me is that I lost focus of what was important in life, and I started trying to please people. So sooner or later, my friends were saying, hey, please us by going out to town. The coach was saying, please us by not going to church and playing on Sunday. My friends were saying, please us by, being this person in public and not that person that you grew up being. And so there was all these pressures to be someone, really because the fact I wanted to receive their approval, that I ended up starting being those people. And the more I started being that person, the further away I got away from my family values, the further away I got away from what was important to me, which was the love of my mum and dad and honouring. And more importantly, the further I got away from actually understanding who God was. And I suppose that's where, when you get to the pit, there's only one way out. And that pit for me was just a depression and the feeling that I had to prove everything. So by the time I'm playing for Auckland at the highest level, Super 10 final, I'll just tell you this, and that year broke me because I was playing for the Auckland team, playing against Transvaal at the Super 10 final on Ellis Park in front of probably 90,000 people. And I made a mistake on the field. It was just a general mistake as a rugby halfback, and because I made that mistake, I just internalized everything and I started to magnify everything. Where I made a mistake, all these top players are now looking at me and saying, why did you do that? Why did you do that? Then I started to internalize it, thinking of people watching from home on TV because it was live broadcast back to New Zealand in the early hours of the morning. Why did you do that? And so this whole spiral of not feeling good because I felt I'd let people down and I wasn't pleasing the people that were loving me, that turned into a real spiral, which eventually turned into a deep-seated depression. And it was really hard. As much as I would try to break out of it, I just couldn't. And so all I thought about myself all the way home back on the plane, all the way back in New Zealand, was, you're a failure. Why did you do that? Everyone doesn't like you. And then so I started to internalize these things, and I got to rock bottom. And then that's when obviously, a lot of things come into your mind. I had a family at the time. I'd been married. I had little kids. But even the fact that they were there telling me that I did well and that I'm awesome, I didn't want to listen because I was so in depth and connected to what people thought in regards to the media, in regards to everything else. So I hit rock bottom, and I found it really difficult, and obviously I started to get more involved with, obviously the nightlife, the partying, because I had to drown my sorrows and be this person that everyone wanted me to be. I thought that if I could get into people's lives, then they'd think, they'd forget the errors that I made. But even though they did make me feel good, the issue was not with people, the issue was with me. And I think that's where the depression got worse, and my sense of my sense of self-worth got worse. And it was only really until I then, by this time I was travelling around, and I came back into fellowship with other brothers that were in my Auckland rugby team. And some of the great names that you'll know is the Michael Jones, Ronnie Clark, Inga Tuingamala. There was other players that were in there as well, and they were Christians. And so coming back into that setting with those guys, they really sort of took me away from the high life and started getting me connected to family things. And so they started taking me to family things, because obviously they were enjoying church and they were enjoying fellowship, and their faith was still strong. So they started taking me to family things, and the beach, or to barbecues, or to family outings. And it was interesting that when I started going to those things, I actually started to feel normal. I actually started to go, hey, I don't actually need drink. I actually don't need to be wasted. I actually don't need to try to be anyone. They're just being family. They're just being themselves, loving, laughing, and typical Islanders, a bit of mocking here and there. But you felt good about it. And I just felt, for the first time, I actually started to feel normal in regards to I don't have to be anybody. So it was from that time, that's when I realized that, man, these guys have got something that I know that is something that I want. And not only that, the biggest part, Rima, was that I had, because it was family things, I invited my family to come. You've got to realize that before this, every time I'd go out to functions or something to do with rugby or whatever, I never really took my family out. It was just me, or my wife was just me. So to actually finally take my family out to a beach, to a barbecue, family gathering, to just social things where we all enjoyed each other's company, and I got to see my wife laughing, I got to see kids running around with other kids. I actually realized that this is what I believe God's plan was for families, is to be in fellowship and to be in a place where you were yourself, and that you weren't trying to be anything, and that you were able to, socialize as a family. So that was the turning point for me, when I saw this and I saw what they were enjoying and just in loving life for what it was. But they had this sense of peace and serenity and just this joy of the Lord about them. I thought, man, that's something I want to hang around. So the more I hang around them, the more I wanted it. And so that's the turning point. And then I started to inquire a bit more. And obviously it wasn't the religious stuff, it was the reality stuff that really got me. They weren't just talking about it, they were living it. And I suppose for me, living it is far more important than talking about it. So, I have a saying which the minister I used to use all the time, which I really take into my life now, and it's don't tell me, show me, because I believe that's what it's all about, is that, we can say that we're going to play well, we're going to say that we're going to front up, we're going to say that we're going to be this and that, but if we actually don't do it, then our words and our actions are meaningless. So that was basically the turning point for me to then say, you know what, I need this peace, I need this joy back into my life. And it was really slowly connecting back into my walk, eventually giving my life to the Lord at a retreat, or at a function that we had. And as they say, the rest is history.